Alright, so we're going to move on to object methods. Now, there's two things that you can define in a class. One we've already seen, which is member variables. The other thing that you can define inside of a class is member methods. So the difference between variables and methods, we usually talk about, sometimes we try to relate things in a programming language to real languages, so we call things nouns or verbs or adjectives or things like that. And in a class, basically the member variables are the nouns. Those are the pieces of information about the class or about the objects, like we saw before when we were looking at our person class. These were two nouns. We would say every person has a name and every person has an age. So that has a is kind of a noun. Now, so moving on to a new example, in example 2, I'm also going to add a person class. This is a completely new program. Get rid of my using statements. So I'm going to do something a little different here. I'll say every person has a first name. Every person has a middle, well, I'll just say middle initial. And I'll say every person has the last name. So just by creating this class in my second example program, I can now create as many people as I want, and every one of those people can have a first name, a middle initial, and a last name. So just like we saw before, back here in my main program, I can say person, I'll just call him Donnie. Well, I better call him like P1 or something, just to, I'll say person 1, just to avoid confusion. So person 1 equals a new person. Oops. I'll create 2 people. Person 2 equals new person. And we'll start with that. So we have 2 people, and each one of them can have their very own first name, middle initial, and last name. So we can start off with the stuff we've already learned by saying person1 dot first name equals Donnie. I'll make that me. Oh. Dot middle equals J. And person1 dot last equals Santos. Alright, so, oops, forgot my semicolon. So let's just keep this kind of together like that. Put this down here. I'll make another person with different values. Actually, I'll just do a copy and paste. Change person 1 to person 2. And I'll give them different values. And I'll give my brother's values. So Michael A. Santos. Okay, 2 people. Person 1 currently has 3 strings inside of it. And person 2 currently has 3 strings inside of it. Just to prove it to you, I'll put a breakpoint there. I'll run it. And you can see here, if I open up person 1 and person 2, you can see the values Donnie, Santos, J, Michael, Santos, A. So everything looks beautiful. So I think this might resonate with you guys a little bit, since you just wrote that horrible program where you had to write a concatenation of the person's first name and middle name and last name, and it was kind of annoying. So in my main program here, what if I asked you to do the same thing? You would have to say system.console.writeline. You'd have to say person1 dot first name plus a space plus, actually, is it right? Plus their person1 dot middle initial plus a dot and a space plus person1 dot last name. So that's really ugly. It's a lot of code. And I'm going to do the same exact thing for person 2. I want to print out person 2's first name and person 2's middle initial and person 2's last name. Alright, and then I'll just do press any key to continue. So the first lesson, I mean, this will work, right? It'll say Donnie J. Santos, and hey, why'd I put a semicolon inside of the... It's weird. Oh, I put the semicolon inside of the values up here. Whoopsie. Get rid of that, get rid of that. Get rid of that. Try that one more time. Alright, Donnie J. Santos, Michael A. Santos, everything works. But we are now encountering the very fundamental rule of good code, quality code, and that is never write the same code twice. So what this thing is doing is I'm invoking a write line, I'm looking at the first name aspect of an object, then I'm putting a space, and then I'm putting the middle initial of the object, then I'm putting a dot and a space, and then followed by the last name of the object. And then I'm doing the same exact thing on the next line of code with a different object. So this is a dead giveaway that my code is bad. I'm doing the same thing twice. Anytime you're doing the same thing twice, you want to use what they call a method. So when I look back here at my person class, so far I have member variable declarations. Member variable declaration, which is basically a noun. Sometimes called instance variables. So I got one there, and I got one there. So all three of these aspects of a person are currently nouns. So what I need is a verb. And a verb is like an action. So people don't just have things, people can do things. And that's what methods are. So a method is basically it's a block of instructions that any person can execute at any given point in time. So first let me teach you the syntax of how to define a method inside of a class. So it looks almost exactly like a variable declaration. So it starts off with something like public string, and then instead of, well actually you give it a name also, so, but this name you don't want it to sound like a noun, this name you want it to sound like a verb. So I'll say get full name. Now here's the part where it's just a little different. Instead of ending it with the semicolon, you put these parentheses. And I know I keep telling you that someday I'll teach you what the parentheses mean, just not today. So just for now, make sure you understand that when you're defining a method, instead of putting a semicolon here, you need a parentheses, a set of parentheses. And then after that, you need a left curly brace and a right curly brace. So this right here is a method. So the aspects of the method are, this is what's called the variable declaration, we call that the type because it defines the type of information that is stored inside of the variable. With the method, we call the type the return type because when we call this behavior, when we tell this action to actually execute, and the word for that is invoke in programming, and we'll be using that word. When we invoke this, when we say, hey you, Donnie, or whoever the person is, we say, hey you, get full name, that is going to give us back a string. So this still acts like a value, which you might say, hey, that's a noun, it's a string. It does act like a value, but it does a bunch of stuff in order to get that value, which makes it more of a verb that results in a noun. So it is a verb, and not all methods actually result in a noun, but the ones we're going to start with do. So you have same thing as before, you have the type, you have the name, just this time make sure you put the parentheses and a matching set of curly braces. And remember, like I said in the first video, you don't need to do that because that's redundant. The right curly brace already indicates that the method definition is over. And if you see this little minus on the left, you can collapse it and it'll kind of, just in case, your method gets really sprawling and there's a bunch of code inside of here, you could just collapse it so you don't have to see all of them, and it'll just look like one of your variables already. So any code that we write in here, basically, anytime we ask a person, hey, get me your full name, it's going to go boom, boom, boom. It's going to do all the code, execute all the instructions inside of this method, and then it's going to give us back the string. So it will result in a string. We just need to write some code to tell it how to get that string. So the simplest way to do that is by using the return statement. So if I say return empty string, every time I ask any person, hey, give me your full name, they're going to say, well, my name is nothing. Or if I said x, return the string x, anytime I asked anybody, what's your full name, they would say, my full name is x. Well, I don't want that. I want, and be careful of this, right? Because then anytime I ask anybody to give me their full name, they're going to say, well, my name is Donnie Santos. Well, that's not true. This is the blueprint. We have no idea which particular person we're going to be talking to. So only one of the objects out there might have that. So we need to have some code here that's going to work for every possible person that we could ask for what is your full name. And that's what the member variables are for. So keep in mind here that whenever you're inside of the class and you're executing or invoking this method, you are a person, and somebody is asking you for your full name. Now, you don't necessarily know who you are, but it doesn't matter, because whoever you are, you know your own first name, you know your own middle initial, and you know your own last name. And you can use the keyword in the language this to accentuate that those things belong to you. So I could say, return this dot first name. And now if I asked the object that had the first name Donnie, hey, get full name, it would give me back the value of Donnie. And if I asked the object with the first name of Michael, get me your full name, it would return the value of Michael. Now you'll notice that this dot is grayed out. The reason is because this dot is optional. So the language is smart enough to be like, oh, what the crap is first name? Oh, I see it up there. So it'll figure out that this string is a member variable of this object. So there's two ways you could phrase this here. There's the really short way, and I'll just show you that really quick, but I'd rather do the verbose way for now. The short way would say return this dot first name plus a space plus this dot middle initial plus a dot plus space plus this dot last name. So now anytime I ask any person, get me your full name, no matter whether it's the person object with Donnie J. Santos or Michael A. Santos, it'll be different. It'll say, well, what's my first name plus the space plus my middle initial plus the dot plus my last name. And why is that a big deal? Is because now, back here where I told you this was bad, I don't have to do all this code anymore. I never have to write that code again. Now I can just say write person1.getFullName. And anytime you invoke the method, again, you need the parentheses. So the parentheses is the method invocation. So notice, again, I don't have to do the same thing twice. I'm what they call reusing the method invocation, and that is the purpose. That's the end-all be-all of writing methods, is reuse. You want to be able to write this method once and then use it as many times as you want, whether it be 2 times like now, or you could be using it thousands of times. So let's step through this a little bit just to show you how this works. So this first part should be no surprise. Creating person 1, giving it my name. So there's me, Donnie J. Santos. Creating person 2, giving it Michael's name. There he is. Now, this is going to be a little weird. So what I'm asking it for is I'm saying, hey, I want you to write something to the screen. It says, okay, what do you want me to write to the screen? Well, I want you to write person1.getFullName to the screen. Well, it's going to say, well, what is that? Well, clearly this getFullName thing is a method that exists on person1. Well, what is person1? It's a person. I declared it as a person. So it's going to go to the class to figure out what the heck this means. So it's going to basically come over to here and say, what do you mean? Oh, you are going to give me back a string, and you're going to need to execute this line of code to figure out what it is. So what you're going to see when we execute this line of code is that it's going to actually what we call dive into this method. It's kind of like a, oh, this is a string. You're expecting me to do some stuff and come back with a string value, but I need to perform some instructions and some computations before I actually can come up with the real string. So just wait here for a second and I'll be right back. It kind of goes over to the person1 object. Let me say it again. It kind of says, wait here for a second, I'm going to go over to the person1 object, I'm going to execute the method getFullName, and then when I'm done, I'll come back and I'll give you your string. And if we want to see that happening, you can hit F10 and skip over it and just see the string that it comes up with. But if we want to actually see it happening, there's another button over here called Step Into. So that's not F10, that's F11. So I'm going to do Step Into with F11, and notice now it has jumped over into the class. And the key to when you dive into a method that's in a class is you have to remember who you are. Notice down here in my locals it says this. Well, look, we can see in this that I'm currently Donnie, right? So I'm here not just as anybody, I'm here as Donnie, and I can verify that by hovering over these two. First name is Donnie, middle initial is J, last name is Santos. So when it executes this return statement and it concatenates this string together, it's going to be my full name that it comes up with. So it should write my full name to the screen, and it did. And now the beauty of this is I don't have to write that code again. It's going to reuse the code that I already wrote to do that. So I'm going to dive in again to the same exact method, except this time the object that is doing that action is a different object. So just as if I walked up to, somebody named John and said, hey, what's your name? They're going to tell me John. But if I walk up to a different person and say, somebody named Jane, and I say, what's your name? They're going to give me a different answer. So even though I'm performing the same action, it's on a different object, therefore I'm going to get a different answer. So this time I'm going to dive into person2.getFullName, and you can see down here, now I'm a different object in this context. Now I'm Michael. So this time it's going to concatenate Michael A. Santos, and it's going to print his name to the screen. So if this long concatenation is a little too hard to read for you, let me break down a little bit. So I can say string full name. So I will declare this, actually I'll give it an initial value of nothing, and then I'll say full name. I will concatenate that by this dot first name. So now I've added the first name onto the full name. And now I'm going to add on a space. And now I'm going to add on the middle initial. And now I'm going to add on a dot and a space. And now I'm going to add on the last name. And then at the end I'm just going to return full name. Now, I haven't changed any of the logic. This will do the same exact thing that it did before. You might say, Donnie, why would you replace one line of code with 7 lines of code? Well, I probably wouldn't actually, but in this case I just wanted to show you there's different ways of phrasing things. This is, it's a less there's no complicated string concatenation expression going on here. It's kind of an incremental approach. I just wanted to give an example of kind of phrasing things differently, and you'll find your own style. You'll find your own way of making things more readable. So I haven't changed this. It'll do the same exact thing. It's going to slowly build up this full name based on what object it's in, and then return it. So again, I'll run the same program, and it says Donald J. Santos and Michael A. Santos. Oh, good. There's a what do you call it? Runtime exception, I think. I hope, because that'll mean that I have a good example to show you. Let's try that one more time. Or maybe it's just a fluke. I think it was just a fluke because it didn't happen that time, and I don't see anything wrong with the code. Okay, so methods. Let me see, what else can I do? Just for, I mean, this is obvious, but just for the heck of it, if I go ahead and put the other variable type back on, like an integer, and I just simply wanted, if I wanted to, let's say, I'll call this one public int get age in 10 years. You know, it doesn't have to make sense, but that's all I could think of. So this one's interesting because it's really no different than this method as far as the syntax goes. You still declare it with the type and the name. Don't forget the parentheses, the begin, the end. And now I have to return a value that's an integer instead of a string. And I also want it to make sense with my variable name. So obviously I'm going to return an integer, and the name of this method implies that it should be my age plus 10. So I think return this dot age plus 10 should work just fine. So that's interesting, and now that gives me an idea for the one last example I want to show you. But first let me show you this. So I'll also add the ages on. I don't know how old my brother is. I think he's 29. So I will go ahead and just do this for now. And hopefully this is leading up to a nice example in code reuse. So I will be 47 in 10 years, and Michael will be 39 in 10 years. Very nice. Okay. So one more example, and this will be an example of two concepts. The first one being something called the void method. Public void, I'll just call it for now, say hello. So, we'll make it at least interesting. I could do something like system.console write line hello. But that wouldn't be very interesting because every object would act exactly the same. So how about I say this dot first name plus space says with a single quote. Oh, I don't need that. Says hello. Should I put a period after it? I think so. See how it looks. So now, depending on which object I invoke this method on, it should say like Donnie says hello or Michael says hello. So if I do at the very bottom, if I say person1 dot says hello, it should say Donnie says hello. Donnie says hello. Looks kind of nice. Alright, so the important thing about this example is that right there. So I told you before that the type of the method implies when it's done doing the behavior or the verb or the action that it's going to do, it's going to come back and, act like a normal old variable with a value. But there are these special methods called void methods, where the return type is void, and those are methods that do not have a value when they're done. Notice I didn't return anything. So that's the rule. If there's a non-void return type, you must have a return statement, because that's what gives you the value at the end. But if you have a void method, then you can't return anything, because void means I'm not returning anything. So a void method is just a collection of instructions that you want to execute, and that's it. So just in the main program, for example, I would never be able to write out the value of a void method, like person1.sayHello. Well, sayHello is a void method. It's not a value. So I can't print out a non-value. I also can't assign a non-value to a variable. For example, these guys right here, I could take that and I could say string s equals person1.getFullName, and then print the value of s right there. That would be just fine. No big deal. Same exact thing as we said before. It's ugly code, but you can still do it. But I can't say, string x equals sayHello, because it cannot convert void to string. You can't convert void to anything. So you can't treat a void method invocation as a value. So it's a special kind of method that does not actually, it's not a noun at all. It's a pure verb. So a void method is a pure verb, and a non-void method is a verb that results in a noun. If that makes sense. So the interesting thing about this is, you can always choose how you want to design your methods. Sometimes you want to return something. Sometimes you want to just do something. And I think in this case, let's try to do a little combination of both. So I want to, for person 1 and person 2, I want to reuse as much code as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name of this sayHello method to, what should I call it? State your name and age. Sure, why not? So what they're going to do is first they're going to say hello. Then they're going to say, I am going to, let's see, my name is this dot get full name. My age is this dot get, actually we'll just say this dot age. We'll just get rid of this method. This one's kind of dumb anyway. Alright, so we have a get full name. We have a state your name and age. And you'll notice here now I'm kind of doing everything in this state your name and age. I'm saying whoever you are, write out your, first of all say hello, then write your name. Inside of this method I'm actually calling the other one. So I'm leveraging one method's functionality inside of another one. And then I'm saying state your age. So this is really, really going to clean up the code out here, because we can destroy all this stuff, all this nonsense, and say person 1 dot state your name and age. Whoa. Person 2 dot state your name and age, and that is it. So we got rid of all that nonsense and just replaced it with two simple method invocations. Now, like I said, this is where kind of the creativity aspect comes in, because you have to decide what methods you want, how they're going to work together, how they're going to accomplish reuse, maintainability, make your code nice and clean, easy to read. This is, it's a very much an art form. But, in this case, I'm just trying to show that you can rely heavily on methods to achieve code reuse. So even with just this, it says, Donnie says hello, Donnie says that's my name, Donnie says that's my age, Michael says hello, name, age, so on and so forth. And one more time, just to make sure that you guys understand, I will debug through it. So we're creating the person, setting all its internal values, creating another person, setting all its internal values. We open them up. We can see all the internal values of the object. And now instead of F10, I'm going to hit F11 to dive into the state, your name, and age. And remember, all methods are invoked for an object. So this person1 happens to be the one with the name Donnie, so I'm going to dive into that with F11. And it warped over here to state your name and age. So this first thing it's going to do is it's going to write Donnie says hello. So if we open this up and we hit F10, we'll see it says Donnie says hello. Now this one's a little different because this is a method which returns a string, and that means it is a string, but it first has to dive into the method to get that string. So if I hit F11, it's going to jump from here way up to here. So now it's going to slowly build up full name, and we can follow it along down here in the locals. Full name is currently nothing. Now it's Donnie. Now it's Donnie with a space, with a J, with a period, with Santos, and then it's going to return that. Finally, we get back to where we were before, and now that it went back up here, executed that method, got the string that this represents, now it can finally print out my name is and my full name, and it does. And this one is simple, no method invocation, just go ahead and print it out. And as soon as we hit F10, we finally get back to where we were before. And then the next line of code is going to do the same thing in the context of a different object. So we go through all that again, but this time with the object that has Michael's values in it. So we're inside of a different object, we're doing the same stuff. Hello, full name, starts building up full name Michael A. Santos. Back here, print it, and the age, and we're done. So, lessons learned, moral of the story is two different kinds of methods. One that has a non-void return value, and those are verbs that also result in a value, just like a variable. And then there's void methods that are not values at all. They're just pure verbs and nothing else. They just execute the instructions for this object, and they're done. Is that all I was going to say? I think so. If not, I will remember in the next video. So, yeah, it's creeping up on 34 minutes here. So, this is the basics of declaring your first methods. It really doesn't get that much simpler than these methods. This is just a simple, hey, give me a value based on the object's member variables, or hey, do some stuff based on the object's internal member variables. The hardest part of this really is remembering the syntax. And just keep in mind that up until this point right here, it's exactly like a variable declaration. But then you just have to remember to put the parentheses, the left paren, all the instructions, and the right paren. And remember that a non-void return type means you need a return statement at the end of the method. Because the return statement is going to say, the method's over, here's the value that I promised you. No return statement for a void method because it just executes the instructions one at a time. One thing that I see people do sometimes is they put more code after the return statement. That's not going to work because the moment the return statement gets hit, it's done. It's out of here. So for example, if I try to declare a variable there, it's going to say unreachable code detected because it'll never get there. The moment that it hits the return statement, method's done. So, I think that's it for basic methods. I will end this video and I will check to see what is left for section 2.